taken to watching TV through a long cardboard tube, the kind that you get posters in, and it made me feel like what I was doing was more meaningful, because it changed my perspective on things. Instead of just seeing the screen, seeing what the people that made the program wanted me to see, I became much more of a active viewer, and I started to take ownership of spectatorship in a way that I hadn't before. And it was all about this research into William Burroughs and trying to create a different position, othering the self. And with this giant cardboard tube, when I went about my everyday life, it just changed everything. Walking down Oxford Street doing my shopping, suddenly I was this exotic creature that people were looking at, but I couldn't even see them looking at me because I could only see circular fragments of reality unfold through my long cyclops eye, and I couldn't really look anyone in the eye very easily. It was hard to have conversations, but I felt almost more connected in a way. And I went for a walk down the streets around my house, streets that were very familiar, but that somehow became completely new and strange with this long mono eye. It felt like the eye was more relevant to contemporary culture, a culture when everything seems to be mediated through flatness, through screens, and the need for a 3D perspective, that illusion that two eyes gives you, depth perception, that didn't seem like it was relevant anymore. And I felt like I had accelerated evolution in some way, that I was experiencing what people would be like in hundreds of years when we didn't need two eyes anymore. They just became a hindrance. And so I guess I did feel slightly smug, slightly superior. And this perspective that I'd given myself was quite godlike, because the orb that I saw unfolding was planetary somehow. It made me feel like I was in outer space, looking down on this spinning earth of images. It was all part of my research into William Burroughs, the writer and artist. Burroughs othered himself in various ways, changed his sensory perception through drugs and lifestyle. And I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to take drugs because, well, I don't really... I prefer to avoid things like that. And so I didn't really need drugs because I had this giant cardboard tube, and it just seemed easier, really. So I went for a walk in the streets around my house, and I was fishing for faces, really, because Burroughs had written in a poem that he wondered when this brain that he was talking about, a brain in a bottle, he wondered when that brain would find a face. It was hungry for a face, it was hungry for a body, and I thought, well, how do you find a face? And so I thought, by looking, you find a face. And I took the cardboard tube eye out into the streets around my house, and I went face hunting. The net curtains became fishing nets, and eventually a face did appear. I'd been staring into someone's house for several minutes, and an old lady came up, grimaced through the window, and then opened the front door and confronted me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just looking," and it's part of my research into William Burroughs, the writer and artist. And she said, "Well, I know the work of Burroughs, I've read some of his poems, but I don't see how you standing outside of my house, looking in through the window through a cardboard tube. I don't see how that is relevant to William Burroughs. And I said, well, maybe it's not. Maybe you're right. I just didn't know where to start, and I had to start somewhere. So this was what I chose to do, to walk down the street with a large tube and to change my sensory perception in this way. We parted as friends, and it had connected us, this stick, this tube, this channel. And I felt sort of optimistic about that. And so I took the cardboard tube on holiday, and the whole of my holiday experience on a weekend trip to Barcelona, a cheap Ryanair deal, the usual tourist thing, seeing the sights, ticking them off on a list. Before, it hadn't felt meaningful, really. I'd felt hungry for something more, and yet with this cardboard tube as my eye, I saw a different city. And while I was there, through glimpsed shots of my surroundings, I noticed that I wasn't the only one that was viewing the world through a device like this. And in fact, people all around me were doing a similar thing. They had these sticks, and they'd attached their camera phones to the sticks, and they were taking photographs and videos of themselves using these detached eyes. They were watching themselves on the screen, watching the screen. A teenage boy was spinning in the centre of Park Güell, and he collided with a young couple that were doing the same thing, sticking their tongues out to make them look like they were having fun and that they still had this childish playfulness, and that their holiday was really great. As soon as the video stopped, their faces going back to a sort of bored expression. I noticed that there were lots of street vendors, people illegally selling things like sunglasses and souvenirs, a blanket and some objects that they wanted tourists to buy, and sometimes an umbrella with jewellery displayed on it. And I was watching through my peephole, and an American tourist, a woman, was reaching down to pick up some sunglasses from one of the stalls, and just as her fingers were within millimetres of these glasses, that they disappeared. They were running up the hill. It was a very surreal experience, especially because I could only see part of what was happening, but they were there and then they were gone. And I'd been thinking about proximity and distance, and how the appeal of having the tube eye and the appeal of having the eye on a stick that I was seeing around me, this was all about creating distance, and that with distance comes desire, because the more rare something is, the more unattainable it is, the more we want it, and the higher its value is. And so it kind of seemed relevant that this product was running away from her, and you could see that she was dismayed by this, and she wanted those glasses more than ever. And what had happened is the consortium of these illegal traders, they'd grouped together and employed a lookout, a person that would watch in case the police came. And if the police came, they would call the lead trader, and his old school Nokia ringtone would go off. He knew when the police were entering the park, and everyone around him knew, and so they scarpered, ran up the hill. Everything folded up within an instant. The market ran away from its buyer. This idea of the market that resists capture gave me some thoughts about a marketing idea, I suppose, for a product that instead of following you around, tries to escape from you, and that you might want it more then if you knew that it didn't really want you to buy it. And I was by the beach then, just looking at the waves through my Cyclops cardboard eye. The waves seemed different. And at the beach, 60-something-year-old, grey-haired, wizard-like man appeared and tapped me on the shoulder and said, Do you know where this stretch of beach is? He said it in pidgin Spanish, but I could tell that he was English because of his accent. And I said, I'm English, and no, I don't really know where that part of the beach is because obviously I'm not from here. And he said, oh, right, okay. Well, it is a nudist beach. And as if to excuse himself, he said he just wanted to look at it and look at people there. And I thought, well, that's actually worse, really, isn't it? If you just want to go there to look at other people being naked. And then he admitted that actually he did want to participate, and that he was looking to take his clothes off in this public space as a way of liberating himself. And he said that occasionally he needed to escape his life as a businessman in Bournemouth. And I found it weird that it's that idea of you going somewhere else to find yourself, that dislocation of the self as a way of becoming more integrated and becoming more authentic. And he'd said that by going to this beach, by getting on a flight and going there, and by taking off his clothes, he was able to be himself again. And it seemed silly because in Bournemouth he could have just taken his clothes off in his house, anywhere, but no, he had to fly a few hours and try to go somewhere else to get where he was anyway. And as I was talking to him, and as I realised that I didn't really respect him when he'd said that he was going to the nudist beach just to look, I thought there's something aggressive about that. About spectatorship without participation, about the distanced viewer. I realised it was kind of the perspective that I'd given myself with the large cardboard tube, that I'd distanced myself, and that maybe he was right. Being part of that situation was much better than being an observer. And so it was at that point that I discarded the tube. I thought I didn't need the tube anymore because I wanted to be part of the world. I didn't want to be distanced anymore. I wanted to have two eyes, to be located within a space that I was an inhabitant of.